The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, CHD. It is Sunday, the 4th of January, 2026. We are here. We are in 2026. So we have two more panels for you today. And the first one is going to be Sustaining the Promise of Freedom Through Action with Dr. Joseph Ladapo. So great man. You're going to enjoy that. And then we're going to be showing you Restoring Health Freedom to Our Legislators and Courts. That's our legal department. And again, you're not going to want to miss that either. So enjoy both of those panels and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you guys. Oh gosh, you guys bring me to tears. That's really sweet. Thank you. Let me see. First, okay, there's the timer. And where are Eric, Jack, and Max, or at least Eric and Jack? Are you guys here? All right, cool. Hey guys. Okay, those. I've got three boys. Brianna and I have three boys. And hey, boys. Thank you guys. Thank you very much. It's really sweet of you. Thank you. Well, this is amazing, by the way. I mean, it's beautiful to see all of this support here at CHD. I mean, this is just a huge audience and just wonderful, wonderful positivity. So this is really, really beautiful to see. Well, Brianna, my wife, was not able to make it because she wasn't feeling well, unfortunately, but she is with us energetically and spiritually. And you know, so we have about 20 minutes to talk, and so I'm gonna share. I didn't know exactly how much time I'd have to talk when I shared the topic I wanted to talk about, and so I'm gonna adjust it a little bit in the way I talk about. So, so the title of the lecture is something like Right Action, or how to sustain medical freedom through action, through right action. And right action. So, so I've been very lucky, and I've been very unusual. Fortunately, I have a great, terrific boss, Governor Ron DeSantis, who's not afraid of conflict. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, none of this would be possible without him. And, and what I've strove for over the years is right action. And, what is right action? Well, right action is action that aligns with what the moment needs, what the moment demands, or what the moment requires. That's right action. And, I'm going to talk about some things, and there's some people that it's just not going to resonate with, and that's totally perfectly fine. But the people I want to make sure I reach are the people with whom it does resonate with. Because for me, it's really the most important message I have to deliver during my time on this planet. And, and that is my relationship to right action. Each of our relationships to right action, how we develop, or at least how I've developed that, how we all can continue to grow, in that area in terms of right action. Because right action, make no mistake, right action is absolutely what's required to overcome any enormous challenges. And, and during the time of history, whether you look at Thomas Jefferson and George Washington and Alexander Hamilton and others, and John Adams getting together in the birth of this nation and stepping out into the ledge of uncertainty, and just one step after the next being the correct and the right step to create a country that is really an idea of a representation of freedom, or every other time that people have faced unbelievable odds, but found a way to navigate them and to emerge in a way that was to the benefit of humanity. When those things happen, none of them happen by accident. They happen because, we live in a universe that is completely connected with everything connected to everything else. And here I am, Mary shared, sort of my mainstream credentials. And, and I think that wasn't an accident. God had me go to Harvard Medical School so that I could eventually come out on the other side and say what I think is right, which was is not stuff that I learned at Harvard Medical School or graduate school. But it's absolutely what is needed in my role to help us continue in the direction that we need to continue to reclaim the freedom and the sovereignty that was always ours, and and was granted by God to all of us, to each and every one of us when we came onto this planet. So I didn't have any of these beliefs or any of these insights during the first 40 years of my life, 41, 42 years of my life. And I came to have them because of my wife and because of how she helped me heal tremendous stress and trauma that I was holding within myself. So, so how do we find right action? So when I was a kid, I had a very traumatic experience. When I was 5, I had an extremely traumatic experience. And, and I didn't really experience it as a 5-year-old, right, you're kind of precognitive. So I didn't experience it as some traumatic experience. I experienced it as something that was beyond my ability to process, beyond my ability to really take in. And I talk about it in the book that I wrote. Transcend Fear. And when I had that experience, my heart basically became encased in frost. And I didn't know that that's what was happening, but it was a traumatic experience. It was more than my little 5-year-old brain could really process. And my brain and my body, my spirit said, okay, my consciousness said, this is too much for me. I can't be here right now. And so I left my body, and part of that process was also to protect myself. And I literally encased, my consciousness, my subconsciousness, my unconsciousness, literally encased my heart in ice. And I went about my business going on from there, and I thought everything was fine, because what our mind is willing to basically do anything to protect us. Our mind is willing to create any reality, digest any truth, any belief to protect us. And so I went about my business for years, and on paper I did great in school, got into college, did well in college, got into medical school, did well there. But all this time I was profoundly dysfunctional emotionally. It's profoundly dysfunctional emotionally, because I had a heart that was encased, and you can't connect to other people if your heart's encased. You cannot, you can't relate to other people's experiences if your heart is encased. And if you can't connect to other people, if you can't connect to what's around you, if you can't connect to your surroundings and your universe, then you don't have access. You don't have access to the plane of consciousness from which we can infer and instinctively know what right action is. And one day I was fortunately, I had a friend. She was in the Virgin Islands. She had a free place to stay. I'd never been to the Virgin Islands, always wanted to go to the Caribbean. And I went there, had a great time. Akuya, she came to our wedding. On the way back from that, this is in my third year of medical school or second year of medical school. On my way back, I was on a plane, and there was a woman sitting next to me across the aisle. And, and it was Brianna, and, we ended up talking the entire flight. And the entire flight, long flight, we ended up talking. We got separated in New Jersey because of weather stuff in Newark. And, I've lived in New York. We give New Jersey a hard time. But Newark will always have a soft place and a special place in my heart, because that's where, I was like, even as we were separated and people were looking for connecting flights, I just thought, you know what? I had a really nice conversation with this woman. She's going to California, I'm going to Boston, but, let me just get her contact information. So I got Brianna's phone number, and, we went our separate ways, and I ended up, we played phone tag for a while, and eventually we got into, we were able to reach each other on the phone, and, we would talk, and we would talk, and we would talk, and there was times that I would talk to Brianna for 6, 7, 8 hours on the phone. I would see the sunrise in Boston. And I didn't know it at the time, but I was falling in love with her. I didn't know it. And God orchestrated it like that because I was too emotionally stunted to fall in love with anyone that was in my physical presence and with whom I was in a relationship with. And I had had girlfriends before then, but I had never, not once, had emotional connection, true emotional connection, because I was incapable of doing this. And I didn't know this. We think that whatever we're experiencing is normal. And I fell in love with Brianna over the phone, and I didn't even know. And, eventually we were like, honey, Brianna, why don't you come over and visit? And Brianna came to Cambridge, and we ended up extending our stay because we didn't want to be apart. And then I think I went over to Los Angeles or San Diego to spend some time over there. And then she came back, and we were like, what's the point? We don't ever want to be apart. And so Brianna stayed, her friends and family moved her stuff over back to Boston. And that began my journey of healing. And Brianna worked with me, and fortunately, Brianna she has always been very plugged in to the ecosystem, if you will, of the universe, and this infinitely beautiful, infinitely brilliant, infinitely unknowable system that we are part of, and to which each of us has different awareness of, understanding of, ability to access. And so she helped me as much as she could, and it was extremely rough, guys, because I was profoundly unhealthy emotionally, and and love was like just dropping a bomb into what I had organized as my life, and everything fell apart. All of my beliefs, all of my assumptions, everything that I thought was how the world was supposed to work fell apart, because love in its pure form is completely uncompromising. Love is like, here I am. I don't care what color, I don't care what you believe about people's color, I don't care what you believe about people's, accent, I don't care what you believe about people's whatever, right? Love is uncompromising. And so, my life was full of compromises, because that's what you do when you carry stress and tension and trauma, and each and every one of us carries that to some degree. And so Brianna worked with me, and she helped me, and she helped me, and it was a struggle for years, and it was very difficult because I carried a lot of baggage. And eventually, Brianna connected me with a guy named Christopher Maher. And Christopher Maher is a former Navy SEAL. He lives out in Marina del Rey in California. And, Brianna just, because she's so intuitive, she was like, honey, I saw his picture and I knew he was the one for you to go and speak with. And so I was reluctant. I wanted everything to work out with me and Brianna, but and I wanted to work, but it was so expensive and it looked painful, and I was looking for every excuse to. And I read his book. I was like, this doesn't even make sense. Even though a little part of me felt like there was, I had felt some resonance of truth with it, but the things he was talking about, past lives, and sort of being able to, experience things that transcended just the physical domain. That all was totally foreign to me, but a voice inside of me, right? This voice that directs you toward right action was saying, there's some truth here. And so I went and saw Christopher, and I came in with all my skepticism, my MD, Ph.D. skepticism and all that. And we had the first day, and I spent the first day with him, and I left thinking, I think I just wasted my money and all this stuff. And that night, I went to bed, and I woke up in the middle of the night, and I felt different. And I was like, what is different? What is that? And I'll describe to you what I felt. I felt this funny sensation in my chest. Just this funny sensation, this sort of funny awareness. I went back to bed. I woke up in the morning, and that morning I had the first morning where I was not just incredibly stressed out trying to get the kids to school. And I was like, honey, I don't know what's going on, but every morning, I feel all this stress trying to get the boys to school. And I don't feel that this morning. It's crazy. And, we got out, took the boys to school, and then I caught an Uber to get to Christopher's house to do the second day. And that day, I had the first conversation with an adult that aside from Brianna, because that was different, that I was actually connected. I was connected with that Uber driver. Like, I had a conversation with him in a way that was unlike any type of conversation I'd ever had in my life with a stranger. And I got to Christopher's place that day, and I shared with him. I said, Christopher, if we stop right now, I would be the happiest man in the world, because I've never been able to emotionally connect with another person that was a stranger. It never happened for me. And after that day, I worked with Christopher for 5 days, and I had a miracle every day. And I described some of it in my book, but I had a miracle every day. And working with Christopher, what it created for me was the ability, the opportunity to release tremendous amounts of stress and tension and trauma that I carried in my body, that sat in my consciousness, right? That trampled on my soul and what my soul's true expression would be. And that was the beginning. And that was in December of 2019, because it was divine timing, God's timing, of course, right before the pandemic. And none of the things that I did during the pandemic, the articles that I wrote, after working in the hospital in March 2020, right before Governor Newsom shut down the state, the articles that I wrote in the Wall Street Journal expressing, my perspective on lockdowns or mask mandates or the vaccine mandates, none of that would have been possible without doing the work that I got to start that week, and I continue to this day. And what it taught me was that, in all of us, there's, if you're happy, like I was not happy. Brianna was unhappy because I was such a wreck and such a mess. I was unhappy because, who wants to make their wife unhappy? And who wants to carry around fear? I had tremendous amounts of fear. Who wants to carry around that? Who wants to live like that? But yet we feel so often locked into these things, whether it's fear or whether it's self-doubt, whether it's anger or agitation, whatever it is. Everyone's story is different because all of us, each and every one of us, is unique. But we carry this stuff, and it dims our light, the light of our spirit and our soul. It dims our ability to express ourselves in a way that is consistent with our soul and our connection with the universe. And thereby, it robs the world of that contribution that each and every one of us is able to provide. And my blessing of meeting Brianna and of her sending me to this guy who then helped me unlock, really free myself of so much of what burdened my consciousness, my soul, my body. It made it possible for me to do what I should be doing, which is what I'm doing now. And making action without. And literally, I do what I feel is right. Like, how do I feel it? Well, when we carry less of that stuff, when we carry less stress and tension and trauma, you just naturally become, looks like time's up, you just naturally become more connected with the universe. And the universe has infinite power and infinite knowledge. And through it, and through feeling into it, and literally listening to that, to what we might call intuition, which is really, that's your connection to the universe, talking to you, giving you direction. That is, in my mind, that's the path to right action, to knowing what it is that you should be doing at this particular moment in time or at another particular moment in time, and with whom you should be doing it. Like, all of these things are out there. The knowledge and the information is, we literally walk in it. It's just our ability to access it that's the difference between the impact we're making and the impact that each and every one of us potentially could make. So, normally I talk more about the methods and some of the things, the details of what I did that week with Christopher Maher, and again, I do talk about some of that in the book, but the time is short, so I've had to abbreviate things. But it's very important. I mean, this is really just part of the biggest challenge that humanity is facing, which is really a fight for and a struggle for freedom, like what we are entitled for. And all of these forces, including, frankly, a lot of the reporters I saw reporters from Washington Post and The Atlantic that represent these forces that, and I have nothing against them, but, just to be clear, they represent forces who are working toward the enslavement of humanity. And and they have tremendous power, but the power that each of us has far outspans that. It's just a matter of being able to tap into it. So for folks who are, I'm happy to chat with people more. For folks, like I said, for the people who my words resonate with, who want to talk more about how to access their, how to access themselves, really, because that's all it is. It's really, it's already there. It's just that it's the stress and the tension and the trauma that is, that covers it, that keeps us from accessing fully. So happy to chat with anyone who wants, who sees that as a path that feels in alignment. All right, thanks, guys.
This is our last panel of the day, and it's, I hope, one that will be very uplifting for us. This is about restoring health freedom to our courts and the legislatures. So I want to start, we're going to first sort of go over what each of these people see as the victories that they have won, hard-fought winnings, and then we'll talk about sort of the issues that what remains ahead. But I want to start with Ray Flores, Senior Outside Counsel to Children's Health Defense. Ray, tell us about the victories you have.
All right, everybody. It's an honor to be here. Thank you very much, Mary Holland, for everything. Victories sometimes come in small doses. It can be a filing of a case. It can be raising awareness. It can be press coverage. But they all matter. And so not every case that's filed wins, but it's still a victory of one way, a victory one way or another, right? So in 2020, Mayor de Blasio, he started the mandatory PCR testing for students in New York City. While the case was on appeal, they voluntarily withdrew the mandate, right? Then in 2021, everybody's aware of the bait and switch case. Now, the FDA won, unfortunately, but there are no longer any EUA vaccines available on the market today. In 2021, also, Washington, D.C., the mayor enacted and enforced the minors' consent law that allowed 11-year-olds to consent to their own vaccines. And we were successful in joining that program, right? Yeah. Thank you, man. Yeah, we did it. And then, not too many people know, but the superintendent of the schools of Washington, D.C. tried to mandate COVID-19 vaccines for all the students. And we pushed back hard with letter writing campaigns. And not only did they not implement the COVID-19 vaccine mandate, but no school district in the country ever mandated COVID-19 vaccine. In 2022, we tried the impossible. We tried suing Rutgers University in Pharma's backyard. Unfortunately, we came in second, right? But 2 years later, they withdrew the mandate. So, all right. Public enemy number one, everybody knows it's the PrEP Act. And it allows vaccine manufacturers, COVID-19 vaccine manufacturers, to have complete immunity from lawsuits until the end of the decade. And it also allows them to authorize experimental vaccines indefinitely. Now, why this hasn't stopped, and it can be done by our secretary with the stroke of a pen, is beyond me. Right. Now, the PrEP Act has a lot of hoops to jump through if you do want to sue, and only one lawsuit has ever been filed under the PrEP Act for willful misconduct, and that's my case. It's George Watts versus Department of Defense. And George Watts Jr. waited until he could get a licensed vaccine in order to attend SUNY in person. Unfortunately, the DOD left in distribution the experimental vaccine that killed him. That's according to the death certificate. So we need to fight PrEP at all costs. In 2024, the National Park Service enacted a cashless policy. You cannot enter a national park with cash. So I sued. All of this is what Children's Health Defense is backing, to make them accept cash. And so that case is still active. And as many of you are aware, I sued HHS back in May to have them implement the safety task force for vaccines. And we were successful in getting Mr. Kennedy to reestablish the task force to make child vaccines safer. Now, Mr. Kennedy had sued on behalf of ICANN back in 2018 under a FOIA case to try to get information on what kind of reports to Congress had ever been filed about the advances in safety. And there were never any reports submitted to Congress. Now, that means that, in my opinion, every single vaccine injury and death for the last 40 years can be blamed on HHS, because they never did what they are mandated by Congress to do. Now, the safety task force has to improve the administration, the adverse reaction reporting, the field surveillance, the licensing, labeling, manufacturing, processing, recall of reactogenic lots, storage, transportation, use instructions, and warnings, in order to make vaccines safer than they were in 1987. Now, does anybody get the feeling that vaccines are safer now than they were in 1987? I doubt it, right? And what's beautiful about the task force, now that it's been formed, is that it's wholly operated in-house. It is the FDA head, the NIH head, and the CDC head working together. That means no Maha, no Susie Wiles, no Callie Means, nobody from the outside, only them. And hopefully right now at this very moment, they're working together quietly. You're hearing nothing about this, to actually make vaccines safer and to do what we want them to do. We don't want to hear about Fruit Loops or donuts or anything else. And that's not what I want to hear about. So,
Thank you, Rick.
So perhaps, so I dismiss the case. If they do not follow through, I'll refile and get them to do their work. The greatest victory of all is that CHD has always been correct. Over the last 5 years, I thank everybody, and I thank you most of all.
Thank you so much, Greg. Werner Mendenhall, Mendenhall and Freedom Council.
Yes,
Please, go ahead.
thank you so much, Mary. First of all, the greatest victory is that we're here today and that we're fighting. And Freedom Council itself is a bunch of attorneys that have grown and gotten together to fight these mandates and to restore the Constitution essentially across the United States. And now we're up to about 300 attorneys. And we're working with victims, we're working with experts, we're working with doctors. Everything you can imagine is in that litigation: election law, property law, schooling, family rights. Everything you can imagine is in the litigation these attorneys are doing, and there are thousands of cases out there. We estimate now that the COVID litigation generated at least 30,000 cases, but it's ongoing. There's a lot more work to do, and we need these attorneys out there, and we're trying to make that connection so you can vindicate your civil rights. The next thing I want to talk about real quickly is fraud. I've been litigating fraud for 30 years. So I want to clarify a few things. And Dr. Tenpenny, there is a statute of limitations for fraud. There's something called the discovery rule. That statute of limitations doesn't start to tick until the fraud is discovered. So in that sense, if fraud is discovered late, you may still have a chance to bring it. But under the civil federal statute, there's a 6-year statute of limitations. And we're suing under that. And then there's criminal statutes of limitations as well. So the time is ticking. And this administration is in time and on time. It needs to do some more things, though, and I'm going to get into that right now. First of all, Deb Conrad is here, as are many Freedom Counselors scattered throughout the audience. But Deb Conrad is here, and she filed for violations by Rochester Regional Healthcare System for the mandatory reporting of adverse events when you got the COVID shot. This was mandatory, just like if you came in as a battered spouse or a sexually abused child. They were mandatory reporting, and it brings criminal and civil penalties. We filed that. The federal government did not intervene in that case, and we are litigating it on our own right now. we would invite the federal government to come back in and impose some criminal penalties on Rochester Regional and help us with the civil side of this case. The other thing about that is there are significant fines involved, penalties involved with that add up very quickly. It's $13,000 at least for each failure to report. The second thing is all 2,800 hospitals in the United States have violated their program participation agreement and committed fraud and committed a violation of several criminal statutes. So we want the federal government to bring them to bear, bring them to heel, so to speak, and talk about this. The next case is Jackson v. Pfizer. We're on appeal at the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. Oral arguments are December 3rd in New Orleans. Do you know we're not appealing against Pfizer? Does anyone know who we're appealing against? Yes, the government. The government came in under the Biden administration and intervened to dismiss the case. And the judge dismissed the case based on that intervention. So our appeal is not against Pfizer, the wrongdoer. It's against the federal government, which is going right along with the wrongdoer and said that that case is contrary to the public health policies of the United States. We are begging that the federal government now change its position in that case. It's the biggest single thing we could do, and it would wipe out the PrEP Act protections. With that said, I want you to understand from my perspective, there is a war within the federal government. We have met with DOD, CDC, FDA, HHS. We have presented the evidence to them about various, not just the Jackson case, but various other cases. We're so pleased that good people are working to try to get the government righted. It isn't happening yet, though. It needs to move faster. And at least we're getting the meetings. We weren't getting the meetings under Biden. Finally, Kevin McKernan, who's sitting in the back of the room, proved the lie. Am I up? One more minute. The last thing I want to talk about real quickly is informed consent. We have one of the largest employment cases in the world in California. It's against the University of California system for 250,000 employees. Those employees did not have informed consent when they were forced to take the jab or lost their job over that. So we have that lawsuit pending. It's a class action lawsuit. We haven't got class status yet. Two more suits out there. Willow's case in Akron, Ohio. This family was informed. Her mom was one of my plaintiffs against Smuckers, which mandated. They came into the hospital. They said, no vaccines for this child. None. It's on the medical record, no vaccines. Yet, a nurse practitioner gave the child vaccines. She went into seizures that night, and she died 8 days later. We are suing over battery. Not under, the VICP or anything else. We're suing for battery. And I'm going to tell you, though, already, one of the defendants has been dismissed from the case by the judge. So I think this thing is going to have to go on to appeal to vindicate our right to tell people no. The Shera case also, thank you. The Shera case also, which, thank God, CHD put this out on CHD TV. It's still available. But it shows this incredible collapse of informed consent at the hospitals. Grace Shera, 19 years old, Down syndrome child, with her dad, who is her medical power of attorney, right there. And there's a waiver signed that ended up, it's a long story, but ended up causing a do not resuscitate order to be entered into the record. Grace Shera wasn't competent to sign that form. Her dad was there to sign it, but the form itself is signed by a hospital employee who says, per consent of Grace Shera. And that's the informed consent that led to her death and her classification as DNR, as a Down syndrome child. And the Sheras have been fantastic in this battle. You guys all know we lost the case, so the jury didn't get it. Johns Hopkins experts were flown into Appleton, Wisconsin to testify against us. You should hear that testimony by the ethicist. But literally hundreds of people have lost their Down syndrome children to hospital protocols. And you know, people don't understand how informed consent has collapsed in this country. So that's all I have. freedomcouncil.org.
Thank you, Warner. Thank you. Great work. So next, I'd like to hear from Jane and Sarah Doe. They bring the plaintiff's perspective from a very important case in New York.
Hi, how are you? I'm so honored to be here. Thank Mary Holland for being with us every step of the way and for having children's...
Speak up.
Oh, sorry. I just... Can you hear me now? We're very honored to be here today to tell our story. We thank Mary Holland for being with us every step of the way, and for Children's Health Defense for helping us get where we are. My daughter had 7 medical exemptions, and she was denied. She was kicked out of her school. She was unable to go to school. February 4th, she was an athlete. She had a lot of friends, and she just melted away. She just was so depressed. She couldn't go to school. 7 medical doctors that knew her said do not get. She just needed the 3rd hepatitis B vaccine. She had every other vaccine, and she couldn't go to school because of that. Children with active hepatitis can go to school and walk around. She did not have the 3rd vaccine of a series of 3, and she couldn't go to school. Sujata Gibson and Chad Davenport were our lawyers. They helped us, and on August 12th, we went to federal court, and we won. We made case law. And now a lot of medically ill, fragile children can go to school now because of us. We had letters, we had children come up to my daughter and thank her. They could now go to school. They're medically fragile children, and they couldn't go to school, and they were being kept home, and it wasn't fair. It was either get the vaccine. We couldn't even get the vaccine. She went to a walk-in clinic where they didn't know her. She went without me, and they wouldn't vaccinate her there, not even knowing her history from looking at her. And they wrote a letter to the school saying this child cannot get vaccinated right now, and the school didn't care. The school medical doctor said, oh, we can't let her in school. She might infect other children. How is she infecting other children? She didn't have hepatitis B. But she missed a whole sophomore year of school. And just think when you were, in high school, how important that year was. She missed it all. But we won, and New York still needs a lot of help. And thanks to Children's Health Defense, hopefully we will help New York.
Thank you.
What?
Sarah, do you want to add to what it's like to be back in school?
Yes. Ed, what do you want to?
What it's like to be back in school?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So being back in school feels unreal. I went from sitting in my bed every day, thinking, why is this happening to me? Thinking I wasn't worthy of anything, to, because of Children's Health Defense, being able to go to school. It's amazing. I'm making new friends every day. It's amazing. It's unreal being back in school.
We're so happy. Not all of us were together last night, but we awarded a Children's Health Defender Award to brave Sarah Doe, who really has opened the path. And I want to point out that her vaccine injury that prevented her from getting any more was after the repeal of the religious exemption in 2019 in New York State. She had to catch up to be able to stay in school, and through that developed a severe autoimmune disorder. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, so thank you so much. We'll come back to you. So Kim, tell us a little bit more about CHD litigation as our general counsel at CHD.
Sure, so I'm wearing sort of 2 hats today. I'm me as general counsel, but Sujata Gibson, who along with Chad Davenport represented the Doe family, couldn't be here today. She had an unexpected death in her family. She sends her regrets. She wished she could be here. But I want to point out, the judge in the Doe case understood. They went in on what's called a preliminary injunction, and that's basically saying to the court that this is a really important time-sensitive issue that you have to decide. It was right before kids in New York go back to school generally right after Labor Day, so it was a few weeks before school started. And one of the things you have to show is not only that you have time-sensitive issues, but that there's a likelihood you'll succeed on the merits of the case if it were to proceed all the way to trial, for example. And the judge saw that this case had those merits, which is huge, and that Sarah's claims under the Americans with Disability Act were valid claims to move forward. And we get so frustrated sometimes, I think all of us who are lawyers or who are working with lawyers, the cases get knocked out on things like standing. They say you're not a proper representative to bring a case. So this is a huge, huge victory. And I'm so excited that Sarah is back in school and that we had a judge who really understood the issues here. And I think that, COVID litigation, for all of us, again, was pretty frustrating at the beginning, right? Because no judge wanted to be the judge who was going to step out at first and say anything. I think that is changing over time. As Mary often says, courts follow culture, and the culture is changing. But we have had some really great victories, and I think Ray is correct to point out that those victories may come in different ways. It may be the filing of a case, and even if a case is dismissed on standing grounds, which means the court never gets to the merits of your case. They just say you're not a proper representative, sorry. And that's happened in a number of cases. It happened in the FDA case for the children, for example. And we've seen it happen over and over. But when we get, we can use that information and it enlightens people, and the defender reports on it, and we report on it on CHD TV. And we're sharing that information with more and more people, and that's spreading. And that's why it's also so important to us that you're all here today, because we need your support as well to get the word out about the litigation that we have. And we've been litigating in a number of areas for several years, but one issue that became really important to CHD during the pandemic and even before was the issue of censorship, because CHD itself was censored tremendously. And that impacts every person sitting in this room and every person outside of this room who doesn't even know what they don't know because the information is not made available to them. And we've had several lawsuits with respect to censorship. We had CHD against Meta, which is the parent company of Facebook. We still have a case that was known for a long time as Kennedy v. Biden. It's now CHD against Trump, where it's a putative class action. It was filed as potentially a class action, not only on behalf of CHD as someone who is sharing information and news, but also on behalf of those who receive information. Because all of you have a First Amendment right to receive information and be able to have a variety of viewpoints to make, going back to what Warner was talking about, to make an informed decision, right? If you don't have all the information, how can you truly give informed consent? So that became a huge issue. And we also have another case called the Trusted News Initiative case, which is against an entity, a group of entities which dubbed themselves the Trusted News Initiative. It's the Washington Post and Reuters and BBC and other entities like that. And it's an antitrust case that they're basically trying to shut down alternative viewpoints. And that case is still pending in Washington, D.C. in the district court. And we were very excited a few months ago because the U.S. Department of Justice Antitrust Division filed a statement of interest in that case, which it's a very big deal. They don't do it all the time. And they basically are supportive of our position in that case. So we're waiting for the judge to decide some motions there. Ray talked about how Flores against HHS resulted in the Vaccine Safety Commission coming back into formation. We also had another case filed earlier this year, Cardenas against CDC, and that was a doctor whose practice was largely Medicaid patients, Medicaid children, and she did not want to give them COVID-19 vaccines. As a result, she lost her contract with Vaccines for Children and then lost her Medicaid contract. They basically destroyed her medical practice. But a few weeks after that case was filed, ACIP changed the COVID-19 recommendations for children. That is an interesting timing issue, right? So we see that as a big victory. And we've had victories against mandates. Sujata represented a number of healthcare workers in New York State when they were mandated, and had a trial court judge determine that that state mandate was arbitrary and capricious. I don't think it's exaggeration to say that mandating those healthcare workers, we had something like over 30,000 healthcare workers who were not on the job. And as a result, ambulances, especially in rural areas, upstate New York, Western New York, were having to cross state lines to take patients to hospitals to get care because there were no doctors and nurses to help them in the state. So we are continuing to look at cases that are really true to our mission and focusing on children. And we have some exciting things in the pipeline that we can't wait to bring to you at the end of 2025, beginning of 2026.
Thank you so much, Kim. And would you speak also to New York City workers?
Pardon?
New York City workers. New York City, would you speak to that if you would?
So yes, so we are continuing to fight. I hadn't talked also about Corey v. Bonta and Stockton v. Ferguson. So New York City workers, we have a case going up to the U.S. We're making an application to the U.S. Supreme Court, but we have some New York City workers who courts have ruled in favor of. And Michael Caine talked about earlier today what Mayor Adams has now said he's going to do. This is hugely important for those workers. It was teachers, it was firefighters, it was sanitation workers. Everyone was impacted by this. Corey v. Bonta and Stockton v. Ferguson are two cases, and we have another case with Dr. Merrill Nass that we've been supporting, where doctors have really been impacted by decisions that they aren't allowed to talk about treatments they think are appropriate for their patients. So there had been a law in California which was struck down. It was enjoined, thanks to Rick Jaffe, who's in the room somewhere. Rick also represents the plaintiffs in Corey v. Bonta, and Pierre Corey is here, and Stockton v. Ferguson, fighting those attempts to shut down doctors' speech. Corey v. Bonta went up to the Supreme Court on a petition for writ of certiorari last term, the 24-25 term. Out of over 6,000 applications, ours is the only one that the court hasn't decided yet. It's still sitting on that application. And Stockton v. Ferguson, we're going to file a similar application very soon. And we expect that we'll have a decision from the court in the next several months on that. So that is still live. The Ninth Circuit, in our opinion, is actually not following precedent from the Supreme Court that they should be following. So we are really fighting so that doctors aren't just in the business of medicine, but they are treating their patients and providing true health care and medical care to their patients. And we'll keep fighting for them because it impacts children and it impacts everyone sitting in this room.
Great. Thank you so much, Kim. Wonderful. So Leslie, you are at Health Freedom Defense Fund, founder, president, and have been doing both litigation work and legislative work. So tell us about your victories.
So many of you probably know me because of The Greater Good, the documentary I made on vaccines in 2011. And that's where I met so many of these fantastic people that I've been, so incredibly grateful to call friend for many years. I think Mary and I met 15 years ago, and I just am so grateful and honored to be here today. And I just want to thank you all for all that you guys are doing and for having me here to participate in this. Health Freedom Defense Fund, I founded because I could see what was happening in 2020 and just felt that I had to do something about it. And the first lawsuit that we filed was in March of 2021. Our mission is to educate about our health freedoms, help people advocate for them, and then litigate when necessary. And so knowing what was going on after 20 years of research in vaccines, when 2020 unfolded, there was no doubt in my mind that the big one was finally here. They were going to use this as an excuse to mandate vaccines and travel restrictions and other things under the guise of a public health emergency. And so I had just had this, some attorneys come into my life who were experienced commercial litigators. And I started talking to them about the issues surrounding vaccines and vaccine court and all this. And they said, well, this can't be right. I've been an attorney for 35 years. I've never heard of this. What do you mean there's no due process? There's no discovery. And anyway, they got really fired up. And so they trained up on all the vaccine law. And we were able to file one of the first lawsuits in March of 2021 challenging Los Angeles Unified School District's vaccine mandate when it was EUA for all of their employees. And the school district, the day after we filed, rescinded their mandate. But then the school district lied to the court and said that they didn't have a mandate and they weren't planning a mandate. And so in July of that year, the court dismissed our case as moot, basically as not ripe. We filed again 17 days after the court dismissed. LAUSD initiated a new mandate. And they told anybody that if they don't get the shot, they're going to be fired. They fired 500 people within a short period of that, and then they ended up firing or displacing another more than 500 employees. And so we sued again, but this time we sued on the basis of the shots don't stop transmission or infection, natural immunity is real, and that the lawsuit from 1905 that's been used now for 120 years to justify vaccine mandates is deeply morally flawed. And we wanted that to be narrowed. We thought, we're not going to attack it head on, we're going to attack it from the side. And we lost in front of the same judge. She dismissed the case, but then we appealed, and we won the appeal. And it was fantastic because the court literally argued our same arguments. So 3 judges, a 3-judge panel at the Ninth Circuit, they said, that this is, that we at least deserve the right to prove our case in court, that this is important, that the plaintiffs, everything needs to be construed in their favor at this stage of the pleadings, and that this should proceed. Well, the school district didn't like that. And so they petitioned the Ninth Circuit, and the Ninth Circuit then, in what I believe is a very political move, overturned that. We are now going to appeal. And so we're going to petition the Supreme Court in December to review this, because what the Ninth Circuit en banc panel did is to state that it doesn't matter whether a shot stops transmission or infection. All that matters is that the school district could have believed that the shot would help individual employees. So if this is allowed to stand, it opens the door to unimaginable tyranny, and we cannot let that happen. So that is proceeding. Health Freedom Defense Fund had one of the biggest wins of the COVID era, which is still ongoing, which is that we, in 2021, in July, we also filed a challenge to the Biden administration's federal travel mask mandate, meaning for planes, trains, and buses. And you probably all know that we won that in April of 2022. That was just an amazing moment. I'll never forget when our attorney called and said, "Are you sitting down?" I was like, "What?" He's like, "We won!" And then, of course, everybody remembers all of the videos and photographs of people ripping off their masks and celebrating, and people singing, that they were getting to take off their masks. It was just such an amazing, I think, a real turning point. People started to believe that we could actually have an impact. And I think it's a real testament to the fact that this work, even if we don't win them all, we're going to win some of them, and we're putting the government, the federal government in particular, on notice that we're watching and that we're willing to rally together and marshal our forces and fight back. We're not going to take this crap lying down. So as exciting as the mask case was for me, the biggest win that we've had is something that just happened this past year. And it is literally my proudest moment so far in this work of now almost 25 years. And that is that on April 4th of 2025, the governor of Idaho begrudgingly signed the Idaho Medical Freedom Act, which prohibits medical mandates in the state of Idaho. So this legislation isn't just the first of its kind in the United States. I believe it's the first of its kind anywhere in the world. And it, to me, is the signpost of where we need to focus our efforts. As Dave Weldon said when he was speaking, the federal government is fraught with corruption. How many people in Congress do you really think are good? I think there may be 5 that I would have any faith or trust in. And several of them are speaking here today, tonight, tomorrow. It's called the swamp for a reason, and that's because they have lost their way and they are no longer serving the people. And this is what inspired me to take local action. Most people may not realize this, but our health powers are part of the police powers that are reserved by the Constitution to the states. This is how we fight back, friends. We go into state legislatures and we talk to those people. They live in our states, they live in our communities, and we explain to them the imperative that we have the moral authority to decide what we put into our bodies and into our children's bodies, that no one else gets to tell us how we treat ourselves when we're sick or when we're well. That we and we alone have the moral authority to make those choices, and that we pass this legislation. And so just this week, we posted to our website, and we're working with Stand for Health Freedom and hopefully with CHD and other groups as well. We posted model legislation, so the model bill of the Idaho Medical Freedom Act. It's perfected now. It's on the website with 2 legislative packets. One is to support the grassroots and explain to them how to do this, and one is a kind of explainer for legislators, so that every state in this country can pass medical freedom acts and protect our God-given right to make our own medical choices, because we are not free if someone else can tell us that we have to risk our lives, our safety, for a theoretical good of another person or the group.
Thank you, Leslie. Well said. You're here. Absolutely a great achievement, Leslie, and one that we certainly seek to replicate around the country. So thank you for all your hard work over many, many years. So let's focus on next year. Many people have told us that 2026 is a pivotal year, at least at the federal level, and I agree that's not the locus of all change by any means, but at the federal level it will be significant in whether or not Kennedy, as Secretary of HHS, can continue his work, likely. What do you see as the key priorities for 2026, both legal and legislative? And we'll just go back through the line. Ray?
Well, I'd like to see the CSIP program be attacked, and I have a feeling I'm going to be announcing something fairly soon.
So I know you always call it CSIP, but so the countermeasures program, right, under the PrEP Act?
Yeah, so the CSIP program is that compensation, theoretical, nebulous program that has paid 41 people for all the COVID-19 vaccine injuries, a mean amount of $4,100 each for everything, for a serious bodily injury or death. And so something needs to be done about that. Of course, the PrEP Act needs to be overturned. And if any of you are capable of doing that in Congress, do it.
Thank you. Werner?
I'll segue off that a little bit. I mean, I think, we have such a massive problem. I think we are going to need a national compensation program for the vaccine injured that's very different than everything that we've got in place right now, especially CICP. The second thing is, my focus is fraud. There's $1 trillion worth of pandemic fraud out there. And I want to encourage everyone, because if you know about the fraud, have the facts of the fraud, the information about the fraud from your employer, from your hospital, wherever you are, you actually have standing under the Federal False Claims Act individually. So I'll give you just one quick example, keying off the Deb Conrad case. The vaccine injured who got a shot at a hospital, they went back to that hospital for services for a moderate to severe injury, have standing to bring a fraud case against that hospital if they didn't submit a VAERS report. Just one example. There's $1 trillion worth of recovery out there. I encourage attorneys to sign up at freedomcouncil.org. I encourage you as individuals to think about how it works. Any federal dollar can be recovered if it was based on a lie. At least that's what the law says, and we've got to test that as far as we can. So we're here to help. That's what we want to do, and we got to get that $1 trillion back to the taxpayers.
Thank you, Warner. More power to you. Sarah and Jane, so you're in New York. You said New York needs a lot of work. What do you see as the key things to do in New York?
Well, as a parent, since 2019, we lost our medical freedom. Parents can't choose what vaccines they get. They can't choose not to vaccinate. I would like to see that we brought back medical freedom. Parents should choose. Parents should say what they want their child to have, what medications they want them to have. And they should get an education. They shouldn't have a choice to stay home, to move to another state. They shouldn't have to do that. New York should be like every other state. There's only 4 states that don't allow medical exemptions or religious exemptions.
Absolutely. And I just say that there is a bill in Congress now from Representative Stubbe, the Grace Act, to say as a matter of the First Amendment that every state must have free exercise of religion, including religious exemptions. And we support that, obviously. Sarah, do you want to add anything? What are you doing in your high school or elsewhere?
I just hope that every kid doesn't have to go through and they could just go to school.
Okay, absolutely. Kim?
So I think it's a couple of things. I think that we have to continue to fight mandates on all levels. And while we're doing that and getting rid of those mandates, those medical mandates, not just vaccines, but any other medical mandates, because those laws can be used in many ways and in different states. But while we're doing that, we still have to protect the exemptions that exist or fight for restoring exemptions where there aren't any, because those are providing means, for example, for Sarah to be able to go back to school, and it's helping other children in New York State as well to go back to school. So we're continuing to fight to protect those while we seek to remove the mandates. I think also it's going to be really important and that we hold accountable people and agencies and entities that have caused and continue to cause harm, particularly to children.
Kim and Leslie.
Yeah, I think this is a long battle that we're in, and we have to have a multi-tiered approach. And so I think that we need to do, act at the state level to do things like the Medical Freedom Act. And then I think we also need to do 2 things, which is, 1, pressure the federal government, the Trump administration, as much as possible to give Bobby cover to actually do the work. The more noise we make, the more pressure we put out there to really hold their feet to the fire, the more I think it gives them an opportunity to navigate, because this is just a pit of vipers that they're dealing with. It's, I was at a conference last week and somebody described what's happening at HHS as a hostile takeover. And I think that's such an apt description that, you've got new management in place, but you've got all of these people in the rank and file of the bureaucracy who are actually opposed to what we're trying to do because they drunk the Kool-Aid a long time ago. And I think it's really hard for them. And so they may have lucrative careers in the pharmaceutical industry after they leave the public service. And so, there's just it's a battle. And I think that the best thing that we can do is act locally while we also do as much as we can to pressure the federal government to do the right thing and to follow through on their promises. And I think the other thing is to support our work. Our lawsuits, we may not win always, but we are sending a message every time we sue Disney. We forced Disney to settle with us. We have another case against Nike. Every one of these cases that Children's Health Defense is filing and that HFDA are filing, these cases send a warning sign across the country that we are not going to take this lying down, and that's so important. So your support is still so needed, even though I think a lot of people have activist fatigue. This is not the time for us to let our guard down. This is the time for us to actually put our pedal to the metal.
Yeah, pedal to the metal. I think that's what Dell told us this morning. Yeah, so, and for sure, lawsuits are expensive, and we all appreciate Freedom Council, Health Freedom Defense Fund, CHD, support for litigation, because it does send a signal that this is very important and that we believe that they're in the wrong and the laws can protect us. And courts follow culture. That's really, we learned the hard way during COVID. And so now that the public opinion has shifted a lot, the whole country doesn't get it, but I think Mark Gordon showed us a slide that a lot of people are now aligned that they should be the ones making decisions, particularly around vaccination and medical interventions. This is a room full of advocates. This is a room full of educated people. What do we want to ask these people to do to help us advance the work, to change the laws, to change what's happening in the courts and the legislatures? Ray?
I think that it's most important for each and every one of us to start living a healthier life. Because in doing so, right, and in cleansing and in foregoing certain ingestions of, alcohol, medications, any old thing that, they're telling us what we should be eating. I would prefer them to tell us what we should stop ingesting and stop injecting. And so when you reach a point of health, you reach a point of enlightenment. And that's a very difficult place to arrive at. But once you're there, then all the information that you have is firsthand knowledge, and you're able to spot anything that is artificial or less than optimal in every person you see. You can look at someone and know what their diet is. You can look at their thoughts. You can look at their eyes. Light is faster than sound. You can look at their eyes and know the words that are going to come out of their mouths. So everybody, please do your best to be a clear channel for what needs to happen next.
Thanks, Ray. Warner?
First of all, the support, is obvious. We really do need your support. These battles go on for so long. I mean, Brooke Jackson stood up in 2020, and it's still on the docket. So we need that ongoing support. Thank you. The second thing is, one of the funny things about litigation is it's really just about each and every one of you who stood up. All of the stuff that we do is based on your courage, not my courage. It's your courage to stand up at your place of employment, to stand up to a hospital, to stand up to use cash at the national parks. And I think there's a battle that's coming too. We need to make sure we still have a cash economy. That's a whole thing. Stand up when you see something wrong in the elections coming up. When we take a stand individually, it just reverberates out in ways we cannot predict. So that's all I would say. Yeah.
Thanks, Warner. Sarah and Jane, what would you ask of this audience? How could they support you in the quest that you still have in New York State?
Well, you could help us by educating people. Educate yourself. When someone mandates something or says you have to do it, you should educate the people and tell them why they don't have to do it, or other alternatives that you can do. You don't have to listen to what a doctor says if you don't think it's right. Educate yourself. Don't just do it because they said, oh, that's what they told us we have to do. We can't go to school if you don't get that. But educate yourself and educate other people not to do what everyone says you have to do. Yes.
Thanks. Sarah? No, I just want to say, I will speak for Sarah for a moment, that even before this case went to the courts on the preliminary injunction, I had the extraordinary pleasure and honor to be in a Senate committee room with Sarah and with Michael Caine, and we watched Sarah as a young, vigorous tiger go after the head of this Senate committee and really say, I'm 16, I deserve to be in school. It's your job to make sure I can go to school. And I really have never seen more eloquent testimony in a Senate committee room. And actually, they did drop the bill that year, and it really did speak to the power of the testimony of individuals who are affected. In the room at the same time was a mom and a Down syndrome 8-year-old boy who was being kept out of school because he would have been vaccine injured. They wouldn't honor the medical exemption. And those people made a huge, huge impression, even on this senator who really didn't want to be very helpful. So, Kim, go ahead.
I would say, we've talked about legislative advocacy, and we do actually, we at CHD, our advocacy team, Stephanie, Michael, Lisa with chapters, and everyone who works with them, do a great job of getting action alerts out in ways that you can communicate issues that are important to you and your families, but also have those one-on-one conversations, because they are so important. That's how we change hearts and minds. I can tell a really quick story of, I was taking an Uber from my home in Princeton, New Jersey, up to Newark Airport to go somewhere, maybe a year and a half ago. And get in the Uber, there is a clear shower curtain between me and the driver. And I'm like, oh, yeah. He asked me very early in our journey if I was vaccinated, and I said no. I didn't think it was the right choice for me. He then told me about all the boosters he got. He told me about people he knew who were still so scared of COVID that they had to go back to work and they would sit in their office and they wouldn't let anyone come in. You had to put papers outside their door. And then when it was all clear, they would go and get those papers. We talked about treatments for COVID. We had this whole conversation. It started off with a very, are you vaccinated? Why aren't you vaccinated? But we had this long conversation, and we happened to have a lot of traffic. It took us almost an hour and a half to get to the airport. It just kept going and going. It's like someone wanted me to talk to him. But we got to the airport, we get out of the car, he gets my luggage out of the trunk, and he grabs me and gives me a huge hug and told me it was the best ride he had ever had. So it really can, each one of us can really make a huge difference just talking to our friends, neighbors, someone in line at the grocery store, because a lot of times there are people who are interested, they may be curious, they may not understand all the information, and it can empower them as well. And you will make a difference and you will change minds. You may not change everyone's mind, but every mind you change is important.
Thank you. Well said, Kim. Leslie?
I think that's so accurate. I had so many people in my little town in Idaho who wouldn't speak to me for the last 4 years. And now in the last year, all of them are coming up to me in the grocery store. Hi, Leslie. And I'm like, that's their way of apologizing and acknowledging that they were wrong. So I want to give a little bit of practical advice. I'm a homeopath. After I left Wall Street, I became a homeopath, and I raised my son exclusively on homeopathy. And I think it is the single most important thing that every American can do is to learn how to use homeopathy, because when you know homeopathy, you are never afraid again when you have any kind of issue. It doesn't matter if your child falls down and bops their head, or they start, get croup at 11:30 at night, or they spike a fever. You know what to do most of the time. And then you don't actually, that's true health freedom. You don't actually, you're no longer a prisoner to the system. And the other thing is to seek out, ignore all of the physicians who are not on our page. Don't even bother. People tell me, how do I go to a doctor who, get them to take my kid? Don't. Why do you go to those people?
Good advice, Leslie. Okay, so Warner, you wanted to add something?
Two quick things. Jennifer Kennedy is here, and she's got an appeal at the Supreme Court regarding the EUA and the fact that that statute says you can refuse the shot, and it was never enforced the way it was written. The second thing, one of my clients is here, Danny Baker, and I just want to recognize her. She's terribly vaccine injured based on the employer wanting the employees to get the vaccine. And we're working our way through the workers' compensation appeal system in Ohio to try to get her some compensation. And I'm going to tell you, that case, I'm going to just pitch. She needs help. We need help. We've got to hire experts. We got to get testimony in the court next year on her case. There are so few of these. I thought there would be hundreds of workers' comp cases. I'm just not seeing them. She's one of the only ones out there in the country, but we really need to vindicate her in her case. So Danny, I don't know where she is, but she has a table outside. Please stop by and say hey to her.
What's the table?
It's Danny Baker. She was sitting out. She's sitting out there.
Oh, React 19.
She's at React 19.
React 19 table. Yeah, there's a React 19 table nearby. Okay, excellent. Yes. Well, I think, thank you all so much. We've got a few more minutes. You can go hang out, network, check out the vendors. Thank you all so much for, I think, what was a great day. We'll see many of you here tonight at 7 o'clock. Have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
This and all CHD TV programming is made possible by generous support from viewers like you. Please consider making a contribution today to keep our programming going strong. Thank you.